Hello there. What's going on, guys? I want to talk to you today about a question I get asked a lot as a result of a lot of my battle reports and a lot of my Armada coverage lately, and is why are there so few Squadrons? I want to talk about the decline of Squadrons in competitive play. Basically, what happened. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of a timeline here. I also have a giveaway winner for my latest Patreon giveaway that I'm going to announce at the end of the video. And there is still time to enter the expansion giveaway. All you have to do is become a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos, and you can win a $25 gift card for an expansion of your choice. So all you have to do is become a subscriber and leave a comment. I don't know why I have 3 fingers up. But yeah, that will be announced this week as well. So, what happened to Squadrons, right? When the game first came out, Squadrons were all over the place. You had to have Squadrons. If you didn't bring Squadrons, it was super, super risky. And lately, Squadrons have become less and less required. It's been a lot more likely that you might just not bring Squadrons. You see that a lot. A lot of my games that I have posted, a lot of my tournaments and battle reports have been very, very light or sometimes no Squadrons at all. So we've kind of shifted from an 8 Squadron meta, a 6 to 8 Squadron meta down to a 0 to 2 Squadron meta. And it's not necessarily all the time. There's still Squadron builds, but they're just a lot less common. It's at least in my area, and I know different people have different metas. You have different, things that locally people play. But it's 50-50 whether somebody's going to be running Squadrons or not. So I kind of wanted to talk about why this is and what led to it and where I see it going in the future. So, a little history lesson. Squadrons were pretty much heavily in full force when the game first came out. The big thing was Rhymer balls. Then, once we had Wave 2, we had the Rogues and Villains, so we had Intel, and we had all of these different varieties of heavy Squadron builds. Yavaris has always been a thing. Yavaris was really strong for a while. It's still a great title. There's been a lot of things that have made Squadrons very, very powerful, and especially that death by 1,000 cuts damage that they can inflict on ships. Wave 3's flotillas gave Bomber Command Center, gave rerolls to all those bombers. It was just amazing. There's been so many things that have come out that have made Squadrons better and better and better. I was never a big fan of Squadrons because I felt like they were too much, I think they were a little too over the top, and they cluttered up the battlefield, and they take a long time. And that's one of my biggest problems with Squadrons, is that they slow the game down an awful lot. There's no question when you're in a tournament and Table 1 has 2 people with no Squadrons, and Table 2 both has 2 builds that have, 6 or more Squadrons each, and maybe even more than, maybe 10 or more. Which game is going to go to time, and which game is going to be over with an hour to spare? So, and that's kind of a bummer, because that's actually one of the problems a lot of people who are new getting into Armada have, is they're like, boy, it's just, it takes so long to play. And also, Squadrons are very imprecise, because there's a lot of times people pick them up, or, there's a lot of picking up and putting down, and it's not as clearly precise as games like X-Wing, where the movements are a lot more exact. So, the real rise of Squadrons came, a huge boost, I would say, came with Sloane. So, Sloane came out and brought this huge surge in cheap Squadrons that weren't really used as much, like TIE Fighters and TIE Interceptors. Even Phantoms saw some increased play under Sloane, although it's really about, I think, TIE Fighters, and to a similar extent, TIE Interceptors. But there was so many, 12-plus Squadron builds now, or 10-plus Squadron builds becoming a thing. So Squadrons were running rampant for a little while. Sloane hit, and everybody lost their minds. Squadrons, basically doubled in effectiveness. And so this had a shift. Once people realized the power of Sloane, I think you started to see an increase in ways to counter Sloane, or to counter heavy Squadron builds. At first, a lot of people thought, well, I have to have Squadrons more than ever now. So now you were seeing, Imperial players, a lot of Imperial players were running Sloane. A lot of Rebel players were running heavy Squadron builds to destroy all of Sloane's, TIE Fighters. But then you also started to see a rise of people who were like, you know what, I'm going to counter both of them. Cards like Mauler Mythal and Tin Num designed to do lots of damage to a lot of squadrons with minimal investment. Upgrades like Agent Callus and Flechette torpedoes designed to really kind of help shut down the aces, right? And that was one of these things that we were looking at, is you're like, wow, I brought all these TIE fighters, but then Mauler Mythal came in and like did 1 damage to all of my TIE fighters, and then the next turn did another damage to all of them again, and then after shooting I lost pretty much my entire squadron. I was completely countered in 2 turns. 10 Num can do similar. Flechette torpedoes is a totally different way of shutting squadrons down, and then Agent Callus is great for those aces, because one of the defenses against all of these heavy squadron attacks was to come back with a whole bunch of aces that, you rolled a whole bunch of damage with your TIE fighter because you got, well, that's no problem, I'm gonna just scatter it. And granted, Sloane can stop that with the accuracies. You can spend the accuracy to spend the result, but there was so much balance, and people running these these hard squadron counters were able to shut down a lot of that for minimal effort, and it just became so much that I think it took a dent into the Sloane meta. Less and less people started playing Sloane, and we started to see a little more of everything else, and a little bit more like, all right, well, let's bring it down to maybe only 4 squadrons and less and less squadrons. Well, then the FAQ nerf had a big impact on this as well, because one of the things that was really, really rampant with squadrons was also people running lots of Gazantes, or flotillas, GR-75s as well, as lifeboats, having them across the board. Put your commander on a lifeboat, put him in the corner, through relay they can still just deal out squadron commands, no problem. The FAQ was another thing that really kind of changed the squadron game that people were used to, and and this was paramount in so many ways. So I'm going to talk about this because, first off, let's talk relay nerf. The relay nerf was probably one of the biggest things, because that means your relay, you have to be close. So you can't just park a flotilla in the corner of the board and have them relay commands all the way across the board. It doesn't work anymore. You have to be in range of the relay in order to get it to relay, which makes sense. And honestly, I don't think anybody's complaining about that. That just makes sense, and that's probably how it should have been all along. But that did change the squadron game, because now your carriers have to be vulnerable. You have to be in relative vulnerability. Now, again, you can have boosted comms on there and kind of stretch that range out a little bit farther and still be somewhat safe, but you have to be in the game to be able to give out those squadron commands, which was a big departure from I don't have to be anywhere near the shooting to give out squadron commands. Additionally, the flotilla's got a number of nerfs. First off, you can't put your commander on a flotilla anymore, so you can't just have a lifeboat that's safe, so your commander has to be in the action. But also, flotillas don't count towards being tabled. So one of the biggest things that you could never do before, which I used to love to do when the game was brand new, is just ignore squadrons and go for their ships. But flotillas proved to be incredibly difficult, because they'd be off in the corner of the map. You couldn't get them. Or when they were in the middle of the battle, maybe they were equipped such that they were hard to kill because of the scatter. Maybe Minister Tua, and different defensive retrofits that made it hard to kill. Or you're running Bright Hope with all other kinds of defensive things to help keep you alive. Maybe Lando Calrissian on there or something like that. So flotillas can be very hard to kill, and they can require a lot of dedicated effort to kill. I mean, sometimes you get a lucky shot and do it, but more often than not, they're very difficult to kill. And so when this FAQ came out, suddenly you were able to just totally ignore flotillas and still win the game. So granted, you could, there used to be the strategy of I could just ignore your squadrons. Flotillas changed that, so now I could have the option of ignoring your squadrons and your flotillas, and then I only have you only brought 1 or 2 capital ships. Well, now I just have to kill 2 ships and win, and I might be able to do that before your squadrons can kill me. And so there became this thing. Well, I'm just going to ignore your squadrons and try to table you. So people were more incentivized to bring more capital ships, non-flotilla capital ships, and less in the flotillas and relay and squadrons, because of all these big FAQ changes, plus the cap of flotillas on 2, which Doesn't really impact this, which I just think may have been overkill, but maybe it was future planning. We'll see. So then Wave 7 came out, and I think hurt the Squadron play even more. So I think Squadron play was already on a decline when Wave 7 was getting ready to come out. But then when we got cards like Early Warning System and Ordnance Pods, which hurt Squadrons even more. Early Warning System, lesser, but still, it's, making obstructed attacks. Most Squadrons are only rolling 1 die, so you're totally shutting down a Squadron's ability to attack you, depending on the situation. And sometimes, especially if it's the front of a Star Destroyer, for example, that may be the only place that they can get in to get a shot, especially in the early rounds of the game, the first couple of rounds of shooting. They don't necessarily, it's a little more difficult for them to have free reign of anywhere on you. And then Ordnance Pods, too. Not the most used upgrade, but it is often used. I've run Ordnance Pods multiple times with the plan of comboing it with other black dice cards like Flechette Torpedoes or other things, or Agent Callus or something like that, to get all those extra attacks and really combo it. And more often than not, when I try to run something like that, I'm going up against no Squadrons anyway. So it's just, because people are like, well, what? I already had a hard enough time bringing Squadrons and making them effective before because of all of these Squadron counters, but now there's even more, and so that brought a bunch of very interesting, anti-Squadron things into the game. So we're left in this meta now where Squadrons are less and less being flown, and so one of the main reasons people would bring Squadrons is to be Squadron defense. So, like, I need to bring a defensive screen of TIE fighters. I need to have at least, 6 TIE fighters to protect my, from. So let me drop one of my ships and put a whole bunch of, TIE fighters in there. Just, even if they don't synergize with a build. For Rebel players, I used to do Z95s a lot, or A-Wings, just as defense, to slow down that Reimer ball or something. But if you know that Reimer ball, or that heavy B-Wing or Y-Wing bomber build, or that, that fire spray build is less likely to come, well, now you're less likely to need the defensive screen. So these two things kind of built on each other, and all of a sudden you saw less and less fighters showing up, less and less Squadrons showing up in the game as a whole. So that made other people less likely to bring Squadrons of their own, thus, which is kind of leads you to the 50% of builds have no Squadrons in them, at least in my area, and that's just a rough estimation. I don't have actual statistics on everything that everybody flies because it changes from week to week. But one of the things that's most interesting about it is that what other people are flying helps dictate what I'm gonna fly, because if everybody is running Squadrons, I have to have a Squadron defense, or I'm more likely to have to. You can still go without Squadrons, even in a meta where everybody's running Squadrons. It's just a lot more risky. And I think the last thing that has really influenced Squadrons is the lack of Squadron availability. Anybody who's gotten into this game recently has had a really hard time picking up the core Fighter 1 packs. The original fighter packs for Rebels and Empire have been out of print for a while. You have to get them for hundreds of dollars on eBay if you want to do that, or borrow them from a friend, unless you're maybe lucky to have somebody who just has an extra one that they've been holding on to for forever. They are being reprinted, however, and they will come back in stock probably early next year, early 2019. I'm expecting Squadrons to be fully restocked, and they should be coming back out hopefully sooner rather than later. But that's really a big thing of it, is people are just not able to get certain things for this game, and that is also an influencing factor as to why less and less people are running Squadrons. Now, in the future, we're going to be having a Super Star Destroyer, and I think that has with it its own possibility of limiting Squadron play. Now, I could be totally wrong about this, but I think just the fact alone of that the upgrades that are available here can really be nasty to Squadrons. I've done, I've had some good anti-Squadron results in like test setup battles using this. You saw one of those battle reports a couple of weeks ago. But one of the things that makes the Super Star Destroyer, at least the one that we know of, so deadly is the 3 officer slots. One of the problems is there are so much competition for that officer slot. And now if I'm thinking about wanting to run somebody like Callus on on my Super Star Destroyer. Well, I don't have any... I can easily do that without having to worry about it. Very, very easy to run Callus because I have 2 spare officer slots, you know, in addition to him. And so if I wanted to run, maybe give my Super Star Destroyer counter 1 by using my offensive retrofit that way, you know, I can really be a very difficult target for squadrons to come after me with. And this can affect both aces and generics equally. For starters, this is the cheapest Super Star Destroyer that we have previewed, so it means everything else is going to be potentially nastier than this. And already we've got 2 blue anti-squadron dice, which is great because even obstructed shots will always be able to take. So, you know, hide behind an asteroid all you want, we're still going to be able to shoot you. Callus means aces are going to take extra damage. They're going to be harder to kill. We're more likely to get the accuracy to stop the scatter. So aces can take damage from us. With counter, we're, you know, if they shoot us, we're going to be able to shoot them back as well. So we will be able to deal with aces. But then generics, we have a lot of dice coming for generics. So we're going to be able to kill generics. Plus we get 3 shots. So you're going to have plenty of opportunities to shoot. Now, one of the things that makes it kind of harder for maybe a really good, in regular games right now, one of the things that makes it hard for a really good anti-squadron ship to get its shot, like maybe you put a raider with, you know, the 2 black dice and you give it flechette torpedoes and ordnance experts and you're like, oh, this raider's going to mess up all of your squadrons. Well, the squadrons can just fly away from it. In the case of Super Star Destroyers, you're more than likely to see very, very small builds, like 1-ship builds might become a real thing. And your squadrons are going to have no choice but to come after me. I mean, if you're going to fly them away, then what's the point of even bringing them? So you have to come into the spider's web and get shot, because that's the whole, you know, otherwise what are you doing? So you're not going to, there's no escape from the Super Star Destroyer's firepower. So that's another thing. I think the squadrons are just going to be completely facing serious opposition. Granted, I'm not saying they'll never, you know, that they're not going to show up, and I think the right squadron lists will probably evolve and change themselves a little bit to better facilitate, you know, combat against larger ships like the Super Star Destroyers. So I think squadrons are in for a rough ride ahead. I think Super Star Destroyer play is going to also present its own difficulties for squadrons. But I am really anxious to see what the future holds for squadrons. So that's basically why I think squadrons are not seeing a whole lot of play. It's just a combination of all these anti-squadron upgrades that have come out over the years, and Wave 7 brought even more. And, you know, this combination of the timing of when Sloane came out made everybody want to have a lot of squadrons, and then, you know, the people were then suddenly motivated to prepare themselves for that eventuality, thus leading to the shock and awe of when you have this great anti-squadron force and your opponent has like, oh, I don't have any squadrons. And you're like, well, I wasted half my points. So that's kind of one of the things, you know, it's been this domino effect. One thing leads to another and leads to another. But that's kind of how it is in my area. I'm curious how it is in your area. I do have a winner. So for that, for the Sato Gen Con Armada promo on Patreon, the winner is Tristan Jones. I want to thank you so much, and big thanks to all of my patrons. I've got more giveaways coming out all the time on Patreon, as well as here on the YouTube channel. So there is still time to enter to win that gift card for $25 for cool stuff for an expansion of your choice. All you have to do is become a subscriber and leave a comment. So let me know what you think. How are squadrons in your area? Are you seeing more and more people run less or even 0 squadrons? Or are you seeing a rise? I'd be curious to hear about that as well. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, have a great day.